I want to talk a little bit about compassion as a follow-on to that, but self-compassion. You were talking about how everything in this moment, it's all about me.
Self-compassion is seeing yourself through the eyes of Source. Feeling about yourself the way Source feels about you. Knowing your power and your value, no matter what. No matter what. No exceptions, no matter what. You're having a bad moment, Source still feels the way Source has decided to feel about you. Because the way Source feels about you isn't about the way you feel about you. It's the way Source chooses to feel about you. How do you create a new reality unless you find a way to feel other than the reality that you're in? You have to set up a vibration.
On Friday that I was going to get in the car and drive to the Long Beach workshop last weekend. And I was similar to what the last gentleman in the hot seat was talking about. I was sitting and listening, and a lot of emotions were coming up for me about what was getting discussed. And I was having a strong step one moment, and it was scary. Like, I felt the intensity of it. And it stayed that way for really the first 2 hours. And I decided I am just going to let myself be where I am. I'm just going to acknowledge those feelings. I could feel it in my body. And I was going to make it okay. And in the third segment, Esther told a story about being in the service elevator with one of the hotel employees.
We told the story about
Sorry,
Esther.
of course.
It's all right. We look a lot alike.
You did tell the story, yes, and it was so beautiful.
Esther got into the service elevator, and a man who believed that she should not be there said to her, "Do you know there are other elevators for you?" And before Esther could explain, he said, "But you didn't know." And his words were so sweet because he wasn't condemning her. He was just observing something. It didn't change his opinion of her. He was just wanting her to understand something. But his vibration didn't dip because of her bad behavior.
Yeah. And I could feel that when you said that. And it immediately, my step one moment went to step 5, where I just thought, what I need to bring to this moment is compassion. And it was the love that he had for Esther, that lack of judgment.
Well, you have to understand, this wasn't just love that he had for Esther. This is love that he has. This is who he walks around being all day, every day. Esther just had the lovely benefit of walking into his web, where he could source all over her.
I love that. And she was a match to that, though. So
She
that
was.
was
She was a match to
reflection
that.
of the love that Esther is.
Yes. And then Esther explained to him, "They have given me permission so that I can get to my room more swiftly, but you didn't know." And isn't that sort of what you want to explain to everyone? We differ because this is the way my life has brought me to be, but you didn't know that. And if that were the attitude that people would have, giving each other the benefit of the doubt because you didn't know, you haven't been walking in my shoes, you don't know what my desires are, you don't know how many engines I've got on each end of my train. In other words, no one really knows. No one knows, but you do.
Yeah.
No one can feel your emotions.
The moment that was me doing that for myself, me being the guy in the elevator, letting myself off the hook in that moment. And it's like all the magic happened right then. And I just showed up, and it was a completely different experience.
This is the most important thing to acknowledge about this conversation. Your inner being knows at all times where you stand in your physical human perspective in relationship to everything that you want. And your inner being is knowingly, compassionately calling you toward the fullness of all that you are and all that you intend and all that you want to be at all times. But as your inner being is calling you, your response to that call varies dependent upon where you are on the emotional scale. When you in your physical personality are flying high and you sense the call of your inner being, it's a delicious, elated, exhilarating, loving moment. if you are overwhelmed and you sense the call of your inner being, it's not as elating, and you might be called through some bumps in the road, but you're still being called. You get all kinds of inspiration. Humans don't want to hear this, but let's say you are feeling vulnerable and in despair. Sometimes you translate the call of your inner being into revenge, because revenge feels better than despair. But it's still the call of your inner being. You see what we're getting at? So it's where you are in relationship to this loving, compassionate call. So that's why sometimes, even in a gathering like this, you could have a step one moment because of whatever resistance that you're still holding about a subject that somebody else might activate in the chair. And you have to understand, it may very well be that we chose that person for you, so that you could feel that resistance and then feel it dissolve. Dissolving resistance doesn't mean getting to the bottom of the issue, wrestling it to the ground and killing it. It just means having a different viewpoint that feels better to you about it. It just means focusing it into a different perspective. Yes?
Yes. That softness, I keep thinking, sprinkling a little love on wherever I am on the vibrational scale. It's transformative. I mean, it felt in that moment, I just jumped. And was it because I was pretty close?
And then as you remember that, so now we're answering the question that we were talking about earlier today. So now you felt that transformative moment, but it's not likely it's going to really stick, because it just happened. It was brief, but as you recall it, as you remember it, as you identify it, as you reclaim the feeling of it, as you practice recognizing that. Esther thought about that young man in the elevator hundreds and hundreds of times. She just milked it. She just milked that delicious moment. When she was by herself, when she was explaining it to other people. Keep it alive, keep it active, keep it active, keep it active, keep it active, until you do own it, until it is you.
Good morning, Abraham.
It is.
I'd like a little bit more clarification of what you just talked about, and I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll stop. I was on Nosebook, and someone posted something that I didn't like, and I get flared up. And I started writing hate mail, and I said, whoa, I'm not feeling really good. My emotions are terrible. I felt fight or flight kicked in. And I said, Abraham says, I'm not looking at it like my source does. So I want...
Abraham says your source isn't on Nosebook.
Thank you.
Well, we're playing with you because we are really not wanting you to ignore life. We're just wanting you to be more deliberate about where you put your attention.
So I stop and I breathe a little bit. So instead of stopping the action, what I did is I changed my emotion to see how nice it would be to bruise that person, digitally speaking. So I continue with my action, feeling much better about what I'm doing.
Well, it really is all that matters, because the other's reaction is irrelevant. Did you look to see if the other was reacting?
To my reaction?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there you go. It's a normal thing, isn't it? You're in this world. The contrast that you're observing is what helps you to define what you want. Step one matters a lot. Step one is such an important part of the equation that you deliberately were born into variety and contrast, because without it, no new ideas could come about. Step two, source answer. Step three is you line up with it. Step four is you get really good at lining up with it. Step four is just mastery of step three. Seems odd to have step four be the same as step three, but you can occasionally be in the receptive mode and recognize it. But when you are consistently in the receptive mode, that's when you've really mastered it. And so we want to give that its own step, step four. And step five is when you've slipped back into step one and you realize it, but you're not mad at yourself for being back in step one. You finally come to understand the value of the contrast. And so all that we're encouraging is that you proceed in your life experience with understanding, that you know when you have negative emotion that you've gone further than you mean to, and that if you continue to push in that way, the negative emotion is going to increase, as is your resistance. And there is no value, once you launch your rocket of desire, in persevering through resistance, because you're not ever going to break through it. You're only going to increase it. It's like saying, I've got 2 engines going in the direction of what I want on my train, and 2 engines going in opposition to what I want. And then I find an issue that I'm pushing against, so I put another engine on the other end of the train. So for a little while, you're not moving forward. In fact, you're going more toward what you don't want. But then in that process, you launch another rocket of desire, which puts another engine on the other end of the train. So now you got 3 engines and 3 engines. So now you're not moving forward either. You could focus upon your desire and put another engine on going the way you want to. But no, you're on nosebook. So you put another engine over here. And so now you're slipping back a little, which causes you to launch another rocket of desire. So now you get another engine on here. And that's the way most people live their life. They inch a little forward and they inch a little back. And they inch a little forward and they inch a little back. And then they blame others. They blame others, instead of understanding that it's only you who can launch desire for you, and it's only you that can offer resistance to your own desire. Only you, only you, only you. So then you might, if you really understand this, you might just ask yourself, with each action that you're intending to take, because an action has quite a bit of momentum in it already. It's not just a thought, and it's not just a word. It's an action that you're taking about something. You might want to just stop for a moment and ask yourself, which end of the train are you adding the engine to? The desire end or the resistance end? Am I helping myself with this thought, word, or deed? Or am I hindering myself? And the truth of it is, you can't get it wrong, because it doesn't matter how many engines you put on the end of your train that are taking you where you don't want to go. You're just launching rockets like crazy, but then you become a tense individual. You become a tense society. You have such strain as you pull against yourselves. Are you witnessing that anywhere around? Where you want and you hate and you love and you hate and you are excited and you worry. And it doesn't have to be that way.